on-premises to cloud. We created this webinar because of feedback that we got both from the industry and the trends that we were seeing from our customers. And we hope that you find the webinar informative. A little about Akaja. We are a software as a service solution provider, and we focus on cloud costing and pre-migration assessment for on-prem to cloud or from cloud to cloud migration projects. We were founded in 2014, and we've grown significantly over the years and have partnerships with all of the big cloud platform vendors, Amazon Web Services, Azure, Google Cloud Platform, IBM Cloud, and also Oracle Cloud. A little small tidbit about me. My name is Cadman Chu. I'll be today's moderator. I was actually one of the early customers of Akaja, and I believed in the product and was such an enthusiast that I actually joined the company as an employee. So just like those old Hair Club for Men commercials, and I'm dating myself a little bit here, since those commercials were back in the 80s, I'm not only an Akaja employee, I'm also a client. A little housekeeping. If you have any questions as the webinar progresses, please use the Q&A section to type in your questions or comments. We're going to try to answer them in real time, but if we don't, know that we're going to get to the question in the latter part of the webinar during the Q&A period. One final note, we do have a special promo that's only available to our webinar attendees for today. So please make sure you stay until the end of the webinar to receive the special promo information. Our presenter today is Garima Thakcham, President and CEO of Akaja Inc. And she will be guiding us through the 3 most overlooked things when moving VMware to the cloud. So without further delay, Garima, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cadman. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you were able to join us today. So I'm going to go through a few slides and then give a live demo of our solution. And also we'll do a couple of polls, just so you know what the agenda for today is going to be. But first, to give you a bird's eye view of Akaja, our use cases, our customers, etc. So at Akaja, like Cadman said, we offer SaaS solutions that enterprises use to plan for transitions to the cloud. And our software is road tested. So our customers have used our software to model over 1 million physical and virtual machines for migration planning. And essentially, our value proposition can be summarized in the blue lettering there. Our software identifies hidden costs as well as hidden savings in the cloud. And the output from our software is a cloud bill of materials, part numbers, quantities, prices, so you can get a head start in your migration activities. Our customers and partners are listed there. We have a lot more than these. These are the ones that we have permission to use their logos. And they can be categorized in these 3 broad categories of users. So the first would be systems integrators and MSPs. And these are clients like Cognizant and Congress. They use our software to conduct cloud assessments and pre-migration planning for their clients. The second category is cloud platform providers. So these would be our clients like IBM Cloud. We also have users among the AWS sales teams, and they use our software to do pre-sales business justifications and pre-migration planning. And then we have a number of end user enterprises. And these would be clients like Cisco, Haveberry, MoneyMart, AQMesh, Paperclip, and many more. They use our software to identify optimal savings for their environments in the public cloud, and also to make business cases for migrations, and oftentimes against migrations, with the data that they create out of the models that our software provides them. So given that, I want to really define the problem that we solve. And clearly, this is a problem you're facing, which is why you're attending here. But essentially, the problem is where to migrate my on-prem VMware environment. And why this is a problem more so today as compared to, I would say, 3 years ago. Today, not only are there multiple clouds, each of them significantly competitive with each other. There are a handful of clear leaders, whereas 3 years ago there was just one leader. But each of those cloud platforms has multiple options, multiple configurations of each of those options. So essentially, selecting a cloud resource is a very complex endeavor today. So whereas in the past, a smart engineer could use the free cloud calculators or spreadsheets and essentially run a quick and dirty model of what they need to order in the cloud. Now that is close to impossible, especially because there are not only a lot of variables in the cloud, but there are also a number of criteria within the on-prem VMware environment that you need to pay close attention to maximize the benefits you would get by migrating to the cloud. So again, if you look at the data center there, which is my stick figure of a house, you have the on-premise environment, and it is normally extremely well-known, carefully tuned. The variables of performance, cost, and security are well understood. It's a stable environment. And then when you think about migrating that environment to the cloud, there you are faced with a boggling array of not just various different platforms, but also within each platform, you have so many families of compute, each with distinct configurations. You have software licenses for various different options, including VMware. And so to really identify which of those cloud resources makes the most sense for your on-prem VMware environment, it can be like searching for a needle in a haystack. And what I want to do for the rest of the webinar is help you iteratively understand how to find that most optimal landing point for your on-prem VMware environment. Okay, so the first thing you would do is really understand what are your two main target options in the cloud. So broadly, you have cloud native resources, and I would put AWS EC2 in their containers, serverless compute. You also have a wide variety of dedicated VMs, bare metal systems. So those would be cloud native resources. And the pros there is that you have access to the latest innovation, and getting started is really quick. Imagine having the ability to quickly try out serverless computing in AWS, or get access to the latest deep analytics that Google has provided, more or less for free. So that's the cool pro of cloud native resources. The cons are, since we're talking about VMware, reformatting from on-prem VMware to cloud native can get very costly. And depending on various settings within your VMware environment, the costs in cloud could be much higher than on-prem. And I'll show you some of these examples from real-world customers as we go through the webinar. The other broad target is your cloud VMware solutions. And the big pro there is that it is your familiar VMware environment. And so that can really ease your lift and shift migrations. And the cons there is that you cannot leverage the latest innovation in the cloud, which oftentimes is one of the biggest plus points of the cloud. So these are your two main target options. And then what you'll need to do is answer these clarifying questions. So the first is, what is your driving objective that's making you consider the cloud? The second is, how business critical is your application? And the third is, what is the size of your environment? And while these may seem like philosophical questions, it's very important to honestly answer these questions because that will really drive the roadmap of your cloud deployment. And your cloud destination can vary significantly depending on your answers to these questions. So now let's take a look at drilling down a little bit more into those questions. So in terms of your driving objective to consider the cloud, there are various objectives that one might have. The first one being disaster recovery. If this is your objective of moving some of your VMware environment to the cloud, then you must consider VMware solutions in the cloud. You have cloud platform providers offering specialized solutions to aid you in your disaster recovery. So IBM Cloud, for example, offers a shared cloud where you can quickly and easily drop your VMware environment. It is preloaded with VMware. Also, Microsoft Azure offers Site Recovery Manager. That is software that actually can monitor your on-prem environment and then flip it over to Azure if needed. So for DR, you should be considering VMware solutions in the cloud. The second is data center consolidation, where you may have multiple data centers, maybe some of them are aging, and you want to consolidate them into a smaller footprint. And there you will have to model to determine the optimal cloud destination. Because for data center consolidation, you might have a number of different scenarios that you should be looking at for different workloads. And you won't know that until and unless you do your in-depth models. Item number 3, there is save costs. So this is essentially a universal objective to consider the cloud. And there, highly recommend that you should do in-depth modeling to determine where your highest cost savings opportunities are in the cloud. And I really recommend this because until and unless you do the models, you may not realize where your different savings opportunities could be. So there are a lot of insights you didn't expect that come out from doing a model. The fourth objective there is leveraging cloud native innovation. And again, here you should model. And because you're doing pre-migration modeling, you actually have a lot of flexibility to do something drastic in your models. So you could take your VMware environment and then model for serverless compute, for example. And you're able to do that because, hey, you don't lose anything. It's just a simple model. But you get to see a lot of insights when you're doing these, experimental models as you're planning for the cloud. So the second clarifying question there is how business critical is your application? And I think the answers to this are pretty obvious to you all. If your application is not very business critical, then you can take the risk of reformatting to take advantage of cloud native innovation. If it is highly business critical, then you want to be conservative in how you migrate to the cloud. And then it just naturally makes sense that you would consider VMware solutions because it is one familiar step and essentially you're moving from on-prem VMware to in-cloud VMware, and that reduces the risks overall. The third question there is what is the size of the environment in terms of number of VMs? We have found that a good threshold is 1,000 VMs. If your size is smaller than 1,000 VMs, then the size is manageable enough for you to try reformatting. And so you could then consider cloud native. And if the size of the environment is over 1,000 VMs, it will be expensive and risky to reformat. So in that case, you should consider VMware solutions in the cloud. So given that, hopefully there was some more clarity in, which direction you should be going in the cloud. And so now what I want to do is dig into some of the overlooked items that have a significant impact on cloud costs. And again, these are real world examples. So none of these data sets are doctored. We're actually using real world environments and then showing you the output from our products. So you will see for the next few slides, this label here that says AIM screenshots. AIM is our product that was used to run these VMware models. and AIM stands for the Akasha Infrastructure Modeler. So essentially, the first screen that you would see within AIM is this one in front of you. So this gives you a lot of cool insights about your VMware environments. And so let's go through that a little bit. The first insight that we'd encourage you to look at is your spare capacity on-prem. And the insight there is that higher the spare capacity, more savings in the cloud. So you will see here, this particular environment, the spare capacity is just 7%. In other words, it is a well-tuned environment. The spare capacity is really low. So then what you see is that the difference between your on-prem cost and your cloud cost is minimal. So this goes back, I'll show you a later slide where higher spare capacity shows higher savings. But essentially, that's one item you need to look at, spare capacity. The second overlooked item, and this is crucially important, is the VMware overcommit ratio. Higher the commit ratio, more your savings with VMware solutions in the cloud. So you're all probably intimately aware that VMware allows you to overcommit your VMs on your servers. If you now take those overcommitted servers and then spread them out into individual VMs, then you're essentially increasing your capacity way more than what you had on-prem, because VMware lets you essentially pack your VMs on the servers with great density. So the cool thing about using the cloud VMware solutions is you can carry over your overcommit to the cloud. And in fact, you get higher density packing in the cloud because you have much more powerful servers. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail. But the second overlooked item that is incredibly crucial is your VMware overcommit ratio. The third overlooked item is network and IO. And I can't tell you how often we find our clients are just shocked at the separate line items that they have to pay for network and IO. And this is because on-prem, the paradigm is to assume network and IO is free because you paid for that infrastructure in your CapEx, and then you're using it continuously. But in the cloud, any network usage and IO actually incurs a cost. So this is an important paradigm shift that you will need to pay attention to as you move from on-prem to the cloud. And with our software, when we do the on-prem discovery of your VMware environment, we actually also do a readout of your network usage and IO. And then our software AIM automatically factors in the costs. Now, although we were only going to talk about 3 items, I wanted to throw in one more overlooked item that is important here, and that is number 4 there. It is the uptime. So when we do the discovery of your environment, we can see what the average uptime was for your environment. And when your uptime is low there, and this is typically applications that don't run 100% of the time. There are things like backup or HR applications that run intermittently. They are great candidates for migrating to the cloud. And you can actually verify that using our software. So let's drill down into more of the compare and contrast around each of these. So speaking of on-prem spare capacity, so I have 2 examples here. One is the one you've been looking at, which is the well-managed environment, which is 7% spare capacity. And then you have another environment where there is excess of spare capacity, 85%, almost 86%. And there you can see the differential between your source cost, which is very high. It's about over 400K, compared to AWS on demand, which drops down to less than 100K. So great savings if your on-prem environment has a lot of spare capacity. And on the other hand, if it doesn't, then your objective to move to the cloud then would depend on other items. So let's talk about overcommit. So higher the commit ratio, more savings with VMware solutions and more reason to not go with cloud native. So if you pay attention to the first screen there, the cores available is around 2,500 and allocated is around 9,500. So that is a significant overcommit of about 4.5%. So if you took that environment and moved to cloud native, you would end up paying a lot more than you would pay on-prem. And so that's the difference between the two arrows there. So you can see that difference. Whereas looking at another environment that doesn't have such a high overcommit, it's a little over 72 available, 174 allocated. There you can see that the costs on-prem and cost for cloud native are comparable. And in both of these situations, if you go for VMware solutions in the cloud, you do see that you save quite a bit. So looking at this particular blue bar here that says IBM Cloud for VMware On Demand, you can see how small it is. So it's roughly 275K compared to just base VMware Cloud On Demand, which is around 525K. So the point to note here is that if your on-prem commit ratio is high, then you should just blindly consider VMware solutions in the cloud. Those are the ones that make the most sense. Then talking about your cost surprise culprits, that's your network and IO. So for the same environment, I went deeper into our application and pulled out the separate costs for network and IO. So you can see that for this particular on-prem usage of 32 terabytes network and 181 terabytes of IO, in AWS reserved instance, your monthly network costs alone will be 69,000, almost 70,000. In Microsoft Azure, you will pay for network and you will pay for IO. For some of the other clouds, the IO cost was 0, and that's because each of the native VMs has a free IO threshold. And so the nature of this particular data set was such that for AWS and for Google, the IO usage was within that free threshold. So you're not incurring a separate cost for IO, but you are incurring a separate cost for network. So in other words, you have to pay attention to network and IO. And again, this is way more complex than doing the free cloud calculators and spreadsheets, because you do need to understand where your free thresholds are and how best to take advantage of that. And AIM, during its mapping exercise, as it is looking for the most optimal cost-effective solution, it automatically picks the right VMs and the right families to give you the best cost advantage. And your fourth item there, which is uptime, just to give you an example, that very same data set model for 100% uptime, you can see the differential between these arrows and this particular box here, where we modeled for actual uptime. So for on-demand, you can see the difference here. So on-demand, AWS drops to about $7,500 a month, whereas if you model for 100% uptime, it's over $16K a month. And similarly for Azure on-demand as well. So if you have an application that runs intermittently, and it's a small footprint, it would be a good idea to consider on-demand and cloud native for those applications. Okay. Now moving on to getting into those VMware solutions in the cloud. So I'm going to talk about 3 platforms here. Google also offers VMware solutions, but we don't support that solution yet. So for now, I'm going to just talk about Azure, AWS, and IBM. So Azure and AWS both offer 2 bare metal servers for VMware solutions. The configurations are listed there. The prices are listed there, but don't hang your hat on them because those prices vary depending on the region. you have. And you can also bring your own VMware licenses to the cloud. That is an option for you. IBM is ahead of the pack when it comes to VMware solutions. And that's because they have the widest range of servers. Not only do they have the widest range of servers, but those servers are also incredibly powerful when you compare them to other offerings in the industry. So what we've found pretty consistently is that when you model your on-prem VMware for VMware solutions in the cloud, Azure, AWS, and IBM, you end up getting the highest bin packing efficiencies in IBM servers just because there's a lot of variety. So we'll talk about that in the demo that I'm going to show you. Going back to really understanding what the savings benefits are, I wanted to show you the analysis we did from a number of different customers. This was about 40,000 VMs. And when we did the analysis, we found that by migrating to the cloud, and in this particular example, it was IBM Cloud, but it could be AWS or Azure, you'll get slightly different numbers. But in this particular analysis that we did, it was for IBM Cloud. We found that the customers could save a total of $35.5 million annually by migrating from on-prem to IBM Cloud. So that's a good 40% savings that they saw right there. And the 40% savings that they got was from infrastructure costs. But they got an additional value from consolidation. And like I mentioned earlier, the cloud bare metal servers are incredibly powerful. So in this particular instance, the total number of on-prem hosts was 2,609. And we found that the VMs in all of those could be packed into just 375 cloud servers. So a significant 72% consolidation improvement. And the value there is not just from management of these smaller footprint of servers, but also from the software licenses. As you know, you end up paying a lot of software by the host, by the CPUs. And if you shrink that footprint, then your software license costs also shrink. So overall, there were significant savings for these sets of clients from migrating from on-prem VMware to cloud VMware. Okay. Now I'm going to jump into the demo, and as I'm setting that up, Cadman, do you want to do a poll real quick or a couple of polls?
Yeah, absolutely, Garima. So let's get a poll going here. And everybody should get their clicky mouse fingers ready to answer the poll here. These are always fun to do. So here we go. We have a poll here. What cloud platforms are you and your clients using or considering using in the near future? We have a feeling we know what the answer is, but it's always interesting to see. Oh, this is very interesting. Okay, so let's publish the result here. So we have Azure being the leader here, and this is very interesting. So AWS, Azure, Google, and then we kind of diminish a little bit. IBM and Oracle Cloud are kind of tied, but very interesting that a lot of people are considering or already using Azure. This is a very interesting result because we're in talking to industry analysts, they're also seeing the same kind of trend. So that's very interesting. Okay, let's do another poll here. How are you doing your cloud platform cost forecasts and comparisons today? Are you using a spreadsheet to model everything? Are you using some kind of calculator supplied by a cloud vendor? Or are you using a third-party software service? All right, so I'll publish this result. So this is very interesting. So we have for our audience here, we have a split between, I'm just going to publish the result, between third-party software and service and spreadsheet. Not a whole lot of people, depending on the calculators that are supplied by the cloud vendors themselves. A lot of people just doing it themselves in a spreadsheet or relying on a third-party software to do it, which is interesting. So that concludes the polls. Garima, are you ready for the demo here? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So hopefully you can see my screen here. What I have here is an on-prem environment. It has 95 hosts and 1,805 virtual machines. And essentially what this is your first screen. And like I showed you in earlier screenshots, this area itself gives you a lot of detail about whether or not this environment makes sense for the cloud. You can also see a quick summary of your best option cloud costs right here. So the next step after this would be to create move groups, because ideally you want to group applications that come together, or you may have a situation where you're maybe end of lifing a certain set of hosts or a certain data center. And so you want to group your data set. So this is where our software automatically creates these groupings for you. And you could simply pick up one of these groups as a move group and run models on it. And I just want to show you all the different options. So you have subnets, tags and applications, you have data centers. So this particular instance has 2 data centers. You have different clusters, and you have powered state. So this would be a good place where you simply pick up your systems that are on and create a move group out of there. So I've already run a model for one of these and found the most optimal environment for IBM Cloud. So in this particular instance, we have 1,590 virtual machines, and their configuration is as listed here on the screen. And our software mapped them to all the different servers available in IBM Cloud for VMware, and did bin packing to really find the most optimal combination. And so the software is recommending that we go with their highest server, which is Cascade Lake Gold 6248, 80 cores. And that server and a RAM size of about 3 terabytes. It's recommending that we use the NSXV license of base and NFS performance of 2 IOPS per GB. And these are the variables that our software has picked, but you have the ability to override it if you want to do more what-if analysis. For as is, it picked 19 hosts, and for right-sized, it's picked 8 hosts. So you end up getting quite a bit of savings from a smaller footprint with right sizing. So here we go. This is your costing of your servers, and this is where we are already building a bill of materials. For each of these destination points in the cloud, you will need additional licenses. Some of those licenses are mandatory, and our software automatically includes them, such as these. And some of them are optional, and that's where we would go to additional services. I'll have to log in there. But essentially, you would go into the additional services section and then order more. And then finally, you end up with a bill of materials that looks something like, I'm going to show it to you here again. But essentially, it looks something like this, with all of the costing included, as well as the part numbers and quantities and so on. So with that, I want to summarize our learnings from today. So there are important points to consider when migrating on-prem VMware to the cloud. Make sure that you understand what your target options are, which are cloud native and VMware solutions, and then make sure you go through the Q&A to further fine-tune which direction you want to go in. If you have a large VMware environment that is mission critical or business critical, then it's almost a given that you should go for VMware solutions in the cloud. And if you do decide on VMware solutions in the cloud, then make sure you go through all of those overlooked criteria that we talked about: spare capacity, commit ratio, network and IO usage, and application uptime, and use our software to do this intelligent mapping into these real-world cloud environments. I have taken the liberty of putting down the comments for each of those items: migration, right sizing, license management, uptime management, operations and management, resizing of VMs, skills and training and costs for each of these categories, transforming on-prem VMware to cloud VMs, and transforming on-prem VMware to cloud VMware solutions, so you can clearly understand what you should anticipate. So with that, we're getting to the end of the webinar. So type in your Q&A, your questions. We'll be getting ready for those. And do we have any Q&A, Cadman, you want to go through?
We do, Garima. So first question is from Stanley.
Mm-hmm.
His question is, will it model the bring your own license cost?
Yes, it does. So we do model BYOL for a number of different options. So you can BYOL your OS licenses, your database licenses, your VMware licenses, and many others. So you have the ability to pick that in the software, yes.
Second question from James. How long do you keep the system monitoring, typically, to get a good data set?
Mm-hmm. So I just want to clarify, we don't monitor the environment at all. What we do is a readout of existing monitoring tools. And for VMware, you likely have vCenter. So all we do is we just suck data out of vCenter. And vCenter gives us 1 year's worth of utilization information from which we calculate right sizing. And it gives us all of the details about the VMs, their usage, their configurations, etc. So we can give you your analysis in just about 15 minutes of you getting started. So just to summarize that and emphasize that, we don't monitor the environment, we do a readout of the environment, so you can get a head start really quickly.
And we have a third question from Mustafa. On-prem storage and IO modeling is always challenging. How is Akaja modeling that?
Yes. So I want to point out here again that we are actually not getting detail on your actual storage. We're looking at storage from the virtual machine standpoint. So from the virtual machine standpoint, we're able to get IO information and storage information, and we use that to then map an equivalent or a right-sized infrastructure in the cloud.
And it looks like that's all the questions we have so far, Garima.
Great. Okay, so do you want to talk about the special thank you for attending?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Garima, for walking everybody through that and for the demo. As mentioned before, we have a limited time promotion for our Akaja Infrastructure Modeler. the gold package, which includes 100 VMs on premises ingested, and of course, unlimited modeling of those 100 VMs. We're offering to webinar attendees only 50% off with our promo code of Akaja Webinar 0428, as you can see on the screen. Just go to our pricing page, pick the gold package, enter the coupon code, and you'll get 50% off for the next 2 weeks.
Great. Just want to show everybody our website. So this is our website. If you haven't yet visited it, essentially you go to our pricing page here, and this is the package you pick. You click buy now and enter the coupon code right there. Great.
Oh, we have one more question, Garima. From James, from an I/O perspective, do you look at queue length?
Oh, to be frank, James, that's a question for our engineers. Let's follow up with you on that.
Thanks, James. Okay, well, thanks very much, Garima, for all that information about cloud costing when moving from on-premises to cloud. Before I was an Akaja client, I was at a large cloud platform vendor, and I was part of the competitive team, helping sales to justify costs to clients and trying to convince them why our cloud was better than the others. And I would do a lot of what some of you would do, was basically use Excel and then extract the info from the cloud platforms and calculate costs manually. With all the different service offerings out there and the number of different clouds, this was extremely cumbersome because I had to enumerate all my on-prem servers and things like that for my clients. And when you multiply this by all the different VM sizes, packages across all the different cloud platforms for all the different memory and network and disk variants, and then across all the different regions, you're looking at millions of combinations of and permutations that you have to address. And also when the cloud platform changed their pricing, like if Azure or AWS changed their pricing, I'd have to go and update my Excel model again. Akaja eliminated all that manual effort for me, and that's why we went with Akaja, and it saved me a ton of time. But the main advantage I found was that going with Akaja, and again, I was a client of Akaja before I joined Akaja. The main advantage was that going with Akaja highlighted hidden costs and saved the client so much money that it paid for itself many, many times over. And that applies if you're doing a one-time move as an end customer, or if you're a consultant doing an on-prem to cloud migration proposal on a continuous basis across many clients, or if you're a product manager doing competitive analysis for pricing, or a solution architect or an SC. This kind of solution was absolutely essential in helping me do my job right when I was at the cloud platform vendor. So I'd like to join Garima in thanking all of you for participating today. As mentioned before, please take advantage of the limited time promotion on our website. Take note of the promotion code there. It'll be available for the next 2 weeks. And we hope to see you online. If you have any further questions, email us at info@akajacloud.com or visit us on our website and use the contact page to contact us, or give us a call. Once again, thanks everyone for attending. Have a nice day and stay healthy. Thank you.